Do you want to learn how to fly? We're going to talk about it in the hangar. Welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Christy Wong.
Oh, I'm Dan Milliken, and you're watching In the Hangar. This episode is brought to you by Wingfield Aviation, a great, transparent, wonderful service company for your aircraft, so give them a call. Well, Christy, this is an important episode. There are tons of people out there, young and old, who don't know where to start when it comes to, I want to learn to fly. And we were so fortunate in our North Texas Aviators Facebook group to have a young woman reach out and say, I don't know what to do, where do I start? And we brought her on the show today.
We said, well, hold that thought.
Hold that thought.
We know the answer, but we're not going to tell you yet.
So, Brooke Schimmel, I want to welcome you to In the Hangar. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for coming.
And I've also asked Josh Flowers, because he knows how to fly an airplane.
I just make it look like it, I swear.
And he's going to help us answer, really, Brooke's questions. So
we're doing kind of a reverse interview today. Today you get to interview us.
Oh, exactly.
I should interview you.
Yeah. So what's your question? What do you want to do?
I really just don't even know where to begin. Of course, when I started looking at what kind of flight school I might want to do, the Part 61 and 141 came up, and I looked into that, and I like to think I know what it means, but maybe if you wanted to brush up on that a little bit more.
Okay, so that's a good thing. Part 141, Part 161. Who wants to hit that?
All right. Well, I've worked for a 141, so I can definitely talk about that. So the Part 141 flight school, they get special certification to be a 141 school. I don't know what the certification process looks like, but they're essentially like they come up with a course outline. They have in-house like check airmen. You have to do essentially check rides throughout the course. So if you do your private pilot, for example, you may get, 2 or 3 different stage checks before you get to your end of course check. When you do your end of course, that's essentially when you do your check ride.
It's more formal. It's a syllabus.
Very formal.
It's you got to check box 1, then check box 2, and check box 3.
And like, for example, as a 141 flight instructor, I can't take you and go, you know what, I really want to work on, stage 1 stuff with you. Or if you're on stage 1, I can't look forward and go, let's work on stage 3. I have to stick within stage 1 and go, okay, have we done this? Have we done this?
Part 61 is you see that kind of a little bit more in the private realm of, like, you hire an instructor that you're going to work with throughout the course of your private pilot training or whatever it may be. And it's not quite as regimented. You don't necessarily have that syllabus. I think most CFIs that I know have a syllabus. I have my own syllabus that I will take a student through, but based on the day or the student, because everybody's different, we can kind of figure out, okay, today let's kind of work on this, because we noticed you're struggling with this topic, so let's kind of take a step back from that and go work on this topic a little bit today. And it's a bit more loose, and you can kind of go at your own pace. It might take a little bit longer to do it that way. It might not. It just depends on the person. But 141 is kind of it's a more rigid and regimented way to go about it, whereas 61 is a little bit looser.
And you know the advantages and disadvantages.
I was just about to go into that. Yeah.
Not quite.
Okay. So there's pros and cons to doing it both. I did all of my training Part 61. I was really fortunate. My husband's a CFI, bless his soul.
Which is an instructor.
Yeah. He did the vast majority of my training, and we still like each other, so that's cool. But we were able to, we planned it out ourselves, and we were able to do it. The disadvantage is that it took me more hours, and versus like a 141 flight school. So for example, you can get your commercial certification done in shorter amount of hours. As a Part 61 pilot, I had to go to 1,500 hours.
ATP is a level of your pilot certificate. I hope you like acronyms, because we got a lot of them. They're everywhere. You start with your private, and then you upgrade your private to a commercial, and then you upgrade your commercial to an ATP, and that's kind of the progression of how it generally goes. But what I generally say in terms of 61 versus 141, and sometimes people disagree with me on this, and I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer here, but I generally say if you want to be a career pilot and you kind of want to get from 0 to hero in a set amount of time and move on to being a career pilot, 141 is generally the way to go. If you're kind of wanting to do it for fun and you want to kind of move at your own pace, 61 is generally the way to go. That's how I generally steer people I've been disagreed with on that plenty of times.
No,
but
I think that sounds pretty accurate. And then, do you know how much it costs to get your private pilot's license?
I've looked on the websites, and you have those rough estimates, but
What are you
depends on
hearing?
what am I hearing? I can't recall off the top of my head, to be
All right,
honest.
I would probably say I would bracket it 7 to 12,000. What would you guys say to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that, about
I
7.
usually say like 8 to 14 when I
So a little
reply to that
higher.
email. Yeah.
So a little higher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on which route you go. But I would ask you this, what is your mission? Are you doing this just for fun to start with? Or are you looking kind of on a grand scale, like, you know what? I think I might want to do this like for a career.
Probably the most important question that could be asked.
It's more of that grand scale, like, is this something I want to do for the rest of my life, you
Okay,
know?
okay, perfect. That actually, that's a perfect, way to go. So the first step I tell anybody when they want to learn how to fly, whether it's for a hobby, well, is not just a discovery flight, go get a medical. Like, you don't want to go in, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I've seen it happen before with a friend of mine. I've seen it happen. He wanted to fly. I took him on a discovery flight. I mean, he looked into it. I want to fly. Went to the AME, denied a medical because it turns out he's colorblind, and I never knew. So he can't fly because of it. And that to me, we spend so much time researching and having these conversations. So step one, go find an AME.
AME is a doctor who can do FAA designated
Exactly.
physicals.
A medical, airman medical or aviation medical examiner. You can find a list of them on the FAA website. You can also go to our online local resources like North Texas Aviators. I mean, you can search in there.
Yeah, who knows a good
Yeah,
AME?
exactly. And people will give their opinions. And you don't have to get a first class medical, right off the bat. I started with a third class, but then once I got my private, my instrument, when I was training for my commercial, somebody told me, you know what, if you want to do this as a career, go get a first class. Just make sure that you can get it, make sure nothing's in your way. So I did. I went and got my first class medical a couple years ago. Okay, good. And then I got my commercial certification and so on and so forth. But that to me is the first step out of all of this.
And her point is if you're going to head that way, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and get that level to make sure you can qualify, because it would be a shame to spend all this money only to find out you're medically disqualified. Where the rubber meets the road level, you cannot solo in an airplane until you have that medical, until a medical
At least a third class, I
Yeah.
believe.
or
Yeah.
basic med.
Or basic medicine, yeah.
Yeah. The second step after, so let's say you go, you get your medical, yay, you are good to go. You're going to want to apply online on the FAA's website. There's an application website. It's called IACRA. Yay, acronyms.
IACRA.
Yeah, you'll apply for your student pilot certificate, and that's a fairly easy process. So you just go on
Something your
there.
instructor would walk you through.
Exactly, yeah. But that way you get that. There's no issues or hiccups with that. You don't have to have that to begin your training, but you have to have it before you can solo. And who knows, she might be an airplane savant and like solo after like 5 hours. So, that's why I tell people there's always 2 things to do pretty quickly if you're going to do this. Is student pilot cert, doesn't cost you anything, and then go and get that medical. Make sure that you're eligible.
All right. So first step, medical, and you're probably looking at anywhere between $40 to $100.
Okay.
Probably.
Depending on who you go to.
And then, so if that's your first step, then the second step really is to find out where you want to go to school. And when I say school, I mean it could be a guy in his plane, or it could be a big-time school. But figure that out, and you can do that by looking, like you've been doing, on Facebook, the North Texas Aviation Group. There's lots of different resources for those who are watching out there. You can just check your Facebook for your area. There's aviator groups all over the country, and they can tell you. And that's a good way to go, because they'll know who the good instructors are. So find a school, then do a discovery flight. All right, and that way you can say, okay, this really is it, or you know what, not for me. So.
I have done a discovery flight.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I have.
Where,
out of the way.
Where did you go?
I was actually visiting home in Washington, and it's right on the border of Washington and Oregon. And I told my parents, my dad, or not my dad, but my uncle used to have his private pilot license and a helicopter license and things like that. And he had a buddy that took us up, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. And this is what's maybe fired you up about aviation?
I was like that a little bit before. This was only a couple weeks ago. But then it really got me like, okay, I really need to figure out where I want to go to school and how to get it to
She was like, airplanes are cool. And then she got to go in one. And now she wants to fly them. See, yeah, exactly. Airplanes are really cool. So.
And what I would say to you and to anybody else is, start with what's close to you, and that would be the nearest municipal airport that's nearest you. And there's probably going to be people or schools at that airport. So you live in Arlington, Texas. So there's actually several airports nearby.
Yeah.
You've got Arlington, and then right next to Arlington is the Grand Prairie Airport. And there's lots of good opportunities there.
My advice to you, just to Dan's point, is to find something really geographically located to you. And the reason I say that is I can't tell you how many people I know that they found a flight school that was across town, and it was awesome, but they lost motivation just to go, because now I've got to drive an hour and a half to get there, and then an hour and a half back, and I just don't really feel like it today, and so they cancel their lesson. Well, of course, that inhibits your learning and your progress, and in the long run, it's going to take you longer and cost you more, and yeah.
Just overall more frustration. I can speak to, living close to the airport really makes your flying better even after you're done with training. Because I used to live 5 minutes from the hangar, and that was great. I flew almost every day. But now I live about 45 minutes, and I don't fly nearly as much. And same goes for training. I've seen it a ton. Students just get very discouraged when they have to travel just to get to the point where they can meet with their instructor.
Yeah, no, seriously, it's a real thing.
Yeah, picking getting nail down where your home airport is, or maybe a cluster of home airports that are close to you, and then just kind of shop in that area first and see if you can find a good, reputable flight school that you like, and maybe you'll meet an instructor that you click with, and you know that the training is going to work, and then you go from there.
What school level are you at?
I graduated high school, so I'm at that point. And
So you haven't started college yet?
No, I have not. So
Okay.
I was actually wondering.
So you're kind of at this crossroad
Yeah.
where you could go to college and get a degree in whatever it may be, or pursue aviation.
Yeah. Well, why not both?
That's right. That's what I was
So
about to
there
say.
are several. No, not even. So like.
PCC?
Well, and not even that either. Well, there's several like four-year colleges. There are several four-year colleges, even in this area, that like I think it's Southeastern Oklahoma State University. They're in Durant.
Oh, that's right.
So they're a four-year university, and you can do the aviation program there. Oklahoma's got like several of those. OU does a
OSU,
program,
Stellar,
OSU.
OSU has a big one.
Yeah, I mean, those where you get both, and with a four-year degree, you're eligible for an even lower restricted ATP. You can actually go fly for the airlines with 1,000 hours.
Have you thought about college? Are you thinking about going to college?
Yeah, I thought maybe, I'd start, at least get my private and then start college, but I'm really not sure what degree to pair, and then how far that degree can take you, how much further,
Yeah.
What kind of, if you go to, let's say, Oklahoma State University, what kind of degree are you getting if you're doing this, if you're heading towards an ATP route?
They have like a professional aviation degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is that.
And depending on what you want to do, if you want to just fly as a career, my experience in the industry and working little contract jobs here and there, I've pretty much heard that your degree doesn't really matter. Just the fact that you have it, that you have a four-year degree of some sort, that's really all anybody cares about. for
My
the most
college
part.
degrees are not aviation related at all.
Right. Yeah, mine's computer science. But
Yeah.
that's completely irrelevant. But the fact that you have that piece of paper saying that you endured, a four-year college degree is really all that matters to an employer that is looking for that.
Yeah.
So, Brooke, what other questions do you have?
That covers a good bit of them. Another one was, so obviously you have your pilots at American Airlines and that kind of thing, and then, but what are some other jobs that maybe you don't hear about very often?
Good question.
Yeah.
You can also fly private jets. Okay, so that would be under the section of regs called 135, a different set of rules. So you could be, fly the Learjet for, Mark Cuban or something like that.
Well, there's
So-
also Part 91 too. It doesn't have to be 135.
Right, for that. But, and then in addition to that, like, I was hired to go shoot some aerial photography. So you can fly and do jobs like that. Pipeline surveying. There's all sorts of things like that. Plus, maybe you don't want to just limit yourself to fixed wing. Maybe you go to rotors and you're flying helicopters.
Right.
And you get a job for MedStar flying air medical. So you can go into the military and fly for the military. There is a bunch of different job options other than you don't have to just go right to American Airlines or Delta.
Right, and there's another aspect of commercial flying that's kind of, you're a contract pilot. I know you've done that a lot.
Yeah, my husband, he does contract flying as well for corporate contract flying.
You basically, you charge a day rate and you're a co-pilot or a pilot on a jet or a small airplane. I got hired on a contract basis to fly a little Mooney, a single-engine, 4-seat airplane for this guy that owned a big oil company. And it was like, once every couple of weeks, he would call me up, and he just needs to be taken to West Texas and back.
Yeah,
and those are cool little jobs to get your foot in the door, and then you meet people, your network grows, and then that's how you get into flying even bigger stuff, and then all that.
In my opinion, there's no better time to get in aviation than right now. Like, strike while the iron is hot.
There is a demand for pilot.
Right.
You would be hitting it at a point where you're most likely going to find work. The catch for this is that it costs a lot of money to get through pilot training, to get all the way to the ATP level. That's the catch-22 many young people fight. It's like, well, how do I get the money to pay for my training? And you need your certificates to pay for the. So it's a catch-22. So you've got to solve that for yourself. You've got to somehow get through there. Some people, go the university route. Some people go the military route, and that they let the government fund their training. So I don't know what your plans are on that, but those are some of your options.
I waited until I was 34 years old before I got to fly. I wanted to so badly when I was in my 20s, and I just couldn't afford it. So I waited and I worked. I got my first career going, and finally made enough money to where I was able to afford it. So I came out of flight training without any debt. But I'm older than I guess the typical.
Well, and I'm older than that, but I'm not going ATP. I just got it for the fun of it. But I got my pilot certificate at the age of 50. 6 months ago. No, I'm just.
That explains so much.
But. I think I'll go back to.
Get back to it, buddy.
But Josh, you got yours right at 17, which is the legal limit.
Yeah.
So we certainly have we've covered the gamut here as far as age. I used to be the young one. What other questions, Brooke?
So we were just talking about leads into another question I had. Once you get your private, sometimes there's good gaps from my understanding in hours when you can start doing other things. How do you fill those gaps and get those hours?
Man, she's got great questions.
Yeah, these are hard questions. Right after you get your private, obviously you're not going to be getting paid to do any sort of flying. You can't. And where that comes in, it's kind of right after you get your private pilot certificate, you're in what's called the killing zone. There's a book about this, and I recommend you read it. You can find it on Amazon. It's called The Killing Zone.
Fun to read on plane rides.
It is.
It freaks out everybody around your head.
Yeah, because it's like a picture of an airplane on the cover. This is the killing zone.
In big old letters.
Yeah, but it's about the realm of hours between when you get your private pilot certificate and about 200, 250. It depends on the person, but it's like this period of time where your experience is super low, but your confidence is super high.
Like 100 hours to 500 hours, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it can.
It's
go
right in that range because you're like Josh said, you're like, okay, I can fly airplanes. I haven't killed myself yet, but you don't know enough to yet to know that you're dangerous still. Mm-hmm. So
you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And it's this big predicament that young pilots or new pilots, I should say, get into. So it's right after you get your private that's a good time to just kind of get out and start taking cross countries. A lot of people buy an airplane at this time, like a little 2-seat Cessna or 172 or something, and just start building time. That's the way I did it. I just started taking long trips. I didn't have an instrument rating yet, and I just built up experience.
And confidence.
And
you build confidence and experience when you do that.
So to give you specific numbers, you're probably going to get your private pilot's license at anywhere from, let's say, 50 to 90 hours, okay? The next step, usually that a lot of people will do is go right into an instrument deal. The instrument training, to me, is about as equal as the private. So let's say you took 6 months to get your private pilot on a Part 61. It's probably another 6 months to get your IFR.
I think that's pretty accurate, yeah.
And it's about the same in cost. So those two things are your big ones. Once you're through those, now you've gotten through instrument, you're probably looking at, you're at 120 to 140 hours, right? The next step is your commercial pilot's license. That one you cannot do until you've had 250 hours. So you've got about 100 hours of flying to do before you can go for your commercial. And that's where you hear the term time building. So you go a lot long cross countries, you do things like that. And then those are some of the numbers. Then to become a pilot, and by the way, I'm giving you all Part 61 numbers. Part 141, the numbers are different. They're less. That's one of the advantages of doing Part 141. The hour requirements are less. But anyway, so after you do all that and you want to get to ATP, for Christy, she needs 1,500 hours to get her ATP, 1,500. So you've gone from 250 on your commercial all the way up to 1,500. Again, Part 141 training as low as 1,000. So, and there's other things that kind of change those numbers. There are different rules for that, but that's just generally speaking kind of what you're expecting. So
So the question is, how do you get from like 250 hours, yeah, I'm a commercial pilot, to, 1,500 hours?
A long way to go.
you'll see a lot of questions on the boards and on Facebook where this 400-hour pilot who's gotten his commercial is asking, hey, does anybody know any jobs? And that's where they're running pipelines and they're doing things like that,
Right.
Aerial photography, and those are really good. They're low paying. There's
Right.
no doubt about that.
The purpose is for you to just build the time.
The
and gain
other
experience.
way, actually, the most common way to build that time is that then after your commercial, you get your instructor's license, and then you start instructing all the way to, because you get, as if I instruct you in the plane, I get to count that hour. And so I build my time by instructing, so I'm getting paid and I'm building hours. That's what Christy's done.
Probably the fastest way to build time. If you are really wanting to go to the airlines, that's the fastest way to do it, honestly.
It is the fastest way. If you're going to instruct, I think you've really, if you're going to instruct well, you've got to love it. You've got to
Yeah.
really love teaching. I've seen a lot of instructors, and it's really made my skin crawl over the years, seeing instructors that are just kind of in it for building time,
Yeah.
and they don't really care that much about their students, and they're
Right.
just kind of, going through the motions and getting the hours. So I wouldn't recommend instructing if you're not super
Yeah.
passionate about teaching, but that is certainly.
There are other ways to build hours.
But I will say this,
It's an effective
I
avenue,
went
yeah.
into it going, I really didn't want to instruct. I grew to love it.
Right.
I absolutely loved
Yeah.
it. I stayed past the minimum amount of hours needed so that I could continue instructing and getting my students through with their check rides, because I loved it so much. I didn't think I would. I did it so just keep that in mind. Be a little bit flexible with that is what I would say.
All right, Brooke, so what other questions?
I had one in my head and I was really listening. What's one that I have? Planes for when you're first learning how to fly. Are there better ones to learn how to fly in?
Well, Skyhawk's the best one in the world. Can I help you?
Actually, I don't disagree with that. I learned how to fly. I got my private pilot in a 172.
Okay, the most common airplane in the world is the Cessna 172. That is the most. It's the most sold and everything else. So because of that, it is the most common one used in flight schools. So the 172 is a 4-seat Cessna. Cessnas are the high wing ones. Okay, the reason why you saw them kind of growl at each other is that he's a high wing guy, she's a low wing gal. So she flies the Piper, which is, so you got Coke and Pepsi. And so she flies the Piper, which is the low wing. The high wing's an easy trainer, and even Christy admitted just now that it's better for training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
They're both just
but
fine.
They're wonderful airplanes.
Yeah, they'll both be fine. The other thing you
That's
might
because Josh hasn't been in the Warrior yet. See, I think once he gets in the Warrior,
haven't
the-
been in yours.
the thing that you want to keep, you might hear some other numbers as you look at schools, is you might hear a 150 or 152. So that's a 2-seat high wing Cessna.
That's what I learned in.
And that's what I learned in. And that's probably most likely, it's the cheapest. I mean, you can find them for $90 an hour wet meaning with fuel.
Right.
So the 172 is a 4-seat. I remember after training in the 150s and 152s, first time I got in a 172, oh man, that plane was
This
huge.
thing's a Cadillac.
Yeah. So those are the planes that you probably will be looking at.
Yeah, because I see sometimes on the flight school's websites, like, oh, you can fly this plane and it's this much, or you can fly this plane, learn on this one, or it's this much. So then I look at that, and then somebody not from aviation, I'm like, oh, what's the difference?
Right.
Avionics too.
It's preference.
I mean, a lot of it's preference. When you see a big cost difference, it's going to be, like Dan just said, avionics. So basically, like
They have full computer screen.
Yeah, like what equipment is installed on the panel and how fancy it is and stuff.
Six pack for the win.
Yeah, I prefer the old school stuff
Yeah.
for
I would
primary.
look for the cheaper plane, honestly,
Yeah.
because you don't need what you'll hear a glass panel. You'll hear that we have glass panels. That means it's all LCD kind of
Means it
thing.
costs more money.
Lots more.
It's going to cost more to rent. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because at some point in your flying career, you're going to fly glass. You're going to need to know how to fly a six-pack too, though. So I always recommend starting there.
6-pack is where you see the 6 round dials.
Right.
And they give you all the different instruments, but they're analog, and they're fed by the old school, the way they were made in the 40s and 50s, and so that's what the 6-pack means.
Right.
Yeah, fly the cheaper.
Yeah. So when you see, I would say gravitate toward the cheaper airplane because it's going to be a bit simpler. In my opinion, that's better if you don't have the glass stuff. But I learned on old school, so I like to teach on old school. So yeah, that's right.
See, that's what we agree.
We agree
yeah.
on something.
So, Brooke, what else?
How much time do you think is actually in the airplane versus like sitting down with your books?
That's a really good question.
Hours wise, it just depends on how
I
you
can tell
study.
you what I did. The way I went to the school I had was a 61, so it wasn't the regimented, and they had like 4 instructors and about 7 planes, and I would schedule on the computer scheduling. I'd schedule the plane and the instructor for a 2-hour block. I'd show up and we'd do ground school for 30 minutes. We'd go fly for an hour 15, and then we'd do a 15-minute kind of wrap up. And we did that through the whole thing. There wasn't any extra ground school for my private. Then when I got to my instrument, I went to a different school, and I thought that that's what they would do. And then they said, you need to buy this, and I paid for a $500 King ground school thing, and that was all on my own, going home every night, going through the materials. So there's several different ways to do ground school, but there is a ground school component that you have to do.
So did you do any studying on your own
That was my
during your private?
They didn't tell me to, and I didn't realize that's what you're supposed to do.
Okay, so you're just like me. Yeah.
So I tell you what happened is that when I showed up, they I bought time in a block. They give you a discount if you buy a 10-hour block or a 30-hour block, whatever. I paid a bunch up front, so I get the cheaper amount. Also, I bought the stuff to begin with. And he handed me a big stack of books. Okay, one was a log book. Okay, then there was the common textbook for all pilots and privates, the Pilot Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, or PHAC or FAC or whatever you want to go. So
Call it the PHAC.
PHAC.
the
thank you.
PHAC.
Yeah, that was.
So, and then there was a couple other
Yeah.
books like that, plus the Bible of the FAA called the FAR AIM, and you'll learn all about that. But anyway, I get this stack of textbooks. But I just love planes. So I took the PHAC, and every night I was just reading the PHAC, starting chapter 1.
Right.
Okay,
And-
so you were doing some ground.
But it wasn't structured.
well, that doesn't
they didn't-
matter.
That still counts. You were reading.
That
though.
still
I mean,
counts,
But
yeah.
I was doing it because I wanted to.
Oh my goodness.
It's still an important bit of information.
Yeah, exactly.
So what I would recommend if you wanted to get started right now and get your foot in the door and start learning stuff, go download that Airplane Flying Handbook and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. These are the actual copies. You can order these online.
So
but
you
they're-
can buy them, but they're free from the government.
Right. They're government documents, so you can get them for free if you want. Read them cover to cover, and there's just priceless information. Doesn't matter your experience level.
yeah. All right.
I'll list those in the things. So real quick, other questions.
So would you have like a recommended amount of days a week that you might try to hit? Because I know some people say they get burnout or.
Good question.
You know.
Well, on 141, you're going to go like all the time. So you're going to go through, you're going to burn out, but you're going to go through it, and it's all part of the process. For me, on my 61, I went 2 to 3 times average, and I was able to get my private done in 6
2
months.
to 3 times per week.
Per week.
Yeah.
I went probably 2 times a week average, and I got mine done in 6 months through thunderstorms and everything else because we get scrubbed. But so that'll happen. So it could be faster if your weather all lined up.
I agree. Minimum twice per week. Go fly.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning of your studies and stuff, you're going to have to focus a lot on the written exam. And that's going to be a lot of the knowledge that comes out of these books. But once you get that written exam out of the way, fly, baby, fly. Fly as much as you can to get through the rest of your training.
If you wait too long, and I would say anytime over 2 weeks between lessons, the next lesson is relearning everything you've now forgotten. And so you're spinning your wheels.
You really slow down.
Yeah.
I would say at least 2 times a week, and I was going to recommend 2 to 3.
Yeah.
I think that's a good
Yeah.
interval per week
Perfect.
to fly. Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
Do you have any just final tips when I go in and look for these flight schools on things that I should be looking for that are good, or maybe red flags?
First of all, instructors and people sometimes mix greatly, sometimes mix not at all.
You need to find a match.
So you need to find a match. And it maybe be good to go to a place that has a couple of instructors so that at least if it's not working out, you can move over to another one. But then also there's success. There's, a guy in his plane, will teach you, and that can work too. So
I would say find someone or some school that meets your mission. If you want to learn at your own pace, don't go to a flight school that's going to tell you you're going to fly 5 times a week and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. But at the same time, don't go to somebody who's like, yeah, I just fly once or twice a week, if what you want is to fly 5 or 6 times a week. So make sure you figure out what you want and then go from there.
Okay. Okay.
all right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad, Brooke. It's so refreshing to have your point of view on all this and your questions. So thanks for putting up with you came in overwhelmed, and I think we just
Overwhelmed you even more.
Yeah. We probably just overloaded you. But
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what? That is going to be flying. You'll drink from a fire hose quite often, and that's part of the process.
But you know what? You're going to love it.
But you'll love it.
You're gonna
And
love it.
there is nothing more rewarding than flying.
Yeah.
Truly.
So.
All right.
All right. So for you guys out there, if you're looking to learn to fly, check out your social media, ask around, and just get in the air. Find that school. You'll love it.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.